Welcome, everybody, to the course of world history. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. Today, we're going to be looking at the Dark Ages. Kinda. This is a part of our look at two worlds of faith where we're going to first dive into kind of the Western world and Christianity. But first, we need to set the stage by talking about the Dark Ages. So our essential question for the day, why do some people call the Middle Ages the Dark Ages? Well, it ties into the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire covered most of Europe, parts of Asia, and parts of Africa. So most of Europe, particularly Southern and Western Europe, North Africa, and Southeast Asia, the Middle Eastern area. Now, this Roman civilization had this centralized government, had a huge population, and was mostly peaceful. Here we're talking internally. Okay, they did wage a lot of foreign wars, but the Pax Romana, this internal piece of the Roman Empire, created a lot of stability for those who were already living within the borders. This starts to change. In the 4th and 5th century, the western half of the Roman Empire was repeatedly attacked by Germanic barbarians. And by 500 AD, the Western Roman Empire had completely collapsed. These Germanic invaders had provided enough pressure, there was enough internal decay in the empire for the Western Roman Empire to completely collapse. This means there's now a vacuum of power, and these Germanic tribes are able to establish new kingdoms that will replace the Roman Empire. So here we can see on this map, 526, after the fall of the Western Empire, we have all of these new kingdoms popping up throughout the old Roman Empire. Now, it's worth noting the eastern half of the empire does live on. They have an eastern capital in Constantinople right here, and we'll be talking about them quite a bit in future episodes. And they still at this point control the eastern Mediterranean Sea as a major power. So these barbarian kingdoms here, again, is a close-up. If you wanted to get a good look at them, you can pause and look at all these names. The Frankish kingdom, this will eventually become the French. So right in there. All right, so the Dark Ages begin. Most people mark the beginning of the Dark Ages with the final defeat of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD. Okay, so that becomes the line for when the Dark Ages begin for many people. Now, in this time, many Roman cities were destroyed. Many Romans were killed and enslaved, and many more died of starvation because of all of the collapse of government, the collapse of services, the collapse of stability that you need to have large, prosperous farms that feed a huge population. So, were the Dark Ages dark? Well, the dark in Dark Ages refers to this loss of knowledge and this loss of civilization during the time. With the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the collapse of these formal systems of education, literacy, etc., yeah, it was pretty accurate. But it's worth noting it's only an accurate phrase for people living in Europe at this time. Outside of Europe, other empires, other peoples, they're still thriving. They're doing just fine. It's not so dark at this time for other areas of the world. Okay, the Arabian Peninsula is about to explode with culture and knowledge. China is doing just fine during the Dark Ages. It is really only Europe, and particularly Western Europe, that is struggling in the Dark Ages. Arabia and China, like I said, they were doing just fine, which makes the Dark Ages a bit of a misnomer for an entire period of time. Really should only be used if you are discussing Western Europe during the Middle Ages. Otherwise, a more appropriate title is just to call this time the Middle Ages. Thank you very much for this short lesson today. I hope you learned something, and farewell.